Hello and welcome to this video where I'm going to be comparing three different camping stoves ranging all the way from £16 up to £110. I'm going to look at their cost, their weight, and I'm going to look at how good they are at boiling water, and that third test is going to take place in still conditions and also in progressively windy conditions to see how they get on. Let's take a look. So there are quite a lot of videos out there on YouTube where people are comparing different camping stoves, and I really wanted to get my engineering geekery involved here to try and make this as fair and directly comparable as I could between all three systems. So I mentioned that we're starting with a £16 stove. This is the little Vango compact stove, and as you can see it's going to have a very open flame, and straight away I found that was really susceptible to wind and it just couldn't hold a burn. And then we're going to try the Jetboil Flash and the MSR Windburner as well. These stoves are really built to operate in wind, particularly the Windburner. So I'm really going to challenge these two because I've got a carpet blower fan just off to my right hand side here, and we're going to blow wind straight at them and see which one caves first. In terms of consistency, what I'm going to do is use the same volume of water. In fact, it's not even the same volume. I'm going to weigh the water every time, so I'll have the very same mass of water in each stove system, and I'm going to take all of the water from a bucket of water I've got down here, so the water temperature will be the same to start each time. I'm also going to use this Coleman Performance gas canister to refill the smaller canister I'm going to use in each test each time. So I'll make sure that the canister is the same mass every time, so we should have the same gas pressure every time, and I can't really get much fairer than that. I've also got a little wind meter, so I'm going to measure the wind speed that's going to blow in from the side. It'll try and blow the heat away or maybe even blow the flame out. So all of this data will be collected and displayed in this video. So what I'll do is I'll just give a general overview of each of the three stoves in terms of their cost and their weight, and we'll kick things off with the Vango compact gas stove. This is the first stove I bought purely because it was cheap and I thought it looked really small as well. So this is £21 direct from Vango. You can still buy them now, or it's £16 on Amazon. Claimed weight is 102 grams and it weighs in at 101 grams today. And Vango also sells this cheap, fairly basic anodized aluminium cook set. They are £21 from Amazon. Claimed weight is 225 grams and it weighs in at 228 grams today. What I found was that the Vango stove wasn't doing very well in the wind, so I also bought this Vango windshield, which you can just open out, and then it's got some little pegs in the end pieces that you can just drop down into the ground to keep it stable. And of course this is going to keep the wind off your stove. This will cost you £18 from Vango or £14 on Amazon. It has a claimed weight of 240 grams, but it's actually weighing in at 215, so there's a little bit of a weight saving over the claimed weight there. So although the stove itself is very cheap, once you combine it with the cook set and the windshield, which I found was really necessary if I wanted to use it while camping, this whole system comes in at £51 and it weighs in at 542 grams. And I think it's really fair to compare that full set to the Jetboil and the MSR because I want to look at the entire cook set together. Moving on to the Jetboil Flash, this will cost you £84. It has a claimed weight of 371 grams. I weigh it as 395 today. So this comes with a lid, the stove itself, and then a gas canister stand on the inside. Jetboils have a nice insulated jacket around them and also a really easy to use handle on the side, so it's really easy to take that off the stove and you can pour with it and drink with it and you're not going to burn your fingers. I do find that you can get your hands a little bit close to the heat with this simpler aluminium set here without the insulated jacket on, so pots like this are really easy to use. I should also mention that you get a little cup on the bottom as well, which is quite handy. And last but not least, it's the MSR Windburner. This will cost you £110 today, and it has a claimed weight of 470 grams. I weigh it in today at 467. So once again, this comes with a lid, it comes with a canister stand, and it comes with the stove itself at the bottom. And much like the Jetboil, this has a 1 litre pot. Also comes with a cup attached at the bottom, and it's got that all important insulated sleeve and a nice easy to use insulated handle for using it with. And this has graduations on the inside of the measuring pot, so you can measure up the amount of water you want to use. So now that I've given you the price and weight of each of the 3 cook sets I'm going to be looking at today, I'll just stick a summary of those costs and the weights next to me, and I'll use the as measured weights that I've measured here today using my scales rather than the claimed weight, so it's a really true, accurate representation of what they weigh. Okay, so it's time to get started with the very first test, which is going to be to bring the same volume of water to a rolling boil on each stove, using the same weight of water and using the same weight of gas each time with no wind. So let's see how we go. We'll kick off with the Vango. Okay, so as I said, the Vango is a really simple stove, just screws straight onto the bottle, and then I set my pot directly on top. Nothing too complicated there. I'm going to make sure I have the canister right on the center line of this work table I'm using here to make sure they're always in the same place, and that's going to be more important when I switch the wind on over to my right hand side here. So as you will have seen from the photo, the starting weight of this gas canister was 170 grams, so I'm going to recharge it to that same weight for each test. Now it's time to zero the scales with the pot on, and then I'm going to add 250 grams of water to this pot. And just so you can see, I'm going to be using all the water from this 1 bucket of water, so it's not going to change temperature as we go through the test, but I will decant this into the pot from a measuring jug. Okay, so I'm going to use my phone as a stopwatch. I've got my 250 grams poured into my aluminium cook pot. Make sure that's nice and central on the flame. I'm going to do all 3 tests with the lid off, and that just means I can look straight into the top of the pot, and as soon as I get a rolling boil on the top of the water, that's when I'll stop the stopwatch. So here we go with the first test. I've opened the valve right up so it's burning as strongly as it can. Let's see how long it takes. Stopwatch is running. It's starting to bubble now, but not on the surface just yet. Okay, that's it. So that was 1 minute 27.74 seconds. I'll just put this on the ground. And what I'm now going to do is wait for the stove to cool down a bit, then I'll take the stove off the canister, weigh the canister, and then it'll tell us how much gas it took to boil 250 grams of water. And that'll mean we can compare the efficiency of all 3 stoves as well. So we'll have the amount of gas it took to boil the water as well as the time. Okay, so the gas canister comes out at 164 grams now. So it took 6 grams of gas to boil 250 grams of water in 1 minute 27.74 seconds. Okay, I've made a note of that result. Now it's time to recharge the gas canister up to 170 grams, and then I'll get the Jetboil up here and we'll run the same test. Time for the Jetboil to step up. I've never used a Jetboil before. This is my friend Luke, so thank you, Luke, for lending this to me. Don't need the canister stand today, but I've topped this canister back up to exactly 170 grams again now. So let's get it screwed on. Make sure that valve is shut first. Take the cup off the bottom, and now weigh 250 grams of water once that's zeroed. There we go, exactly 250 grams. And we have a piezo lighter on the Jetboil, so I really hope it works. I've never used it before. We'll connect the pot on, gas on, and then get it started. Need to get my stopwatch at the ready. Stopwatch is ready, so away we go. Lighted first time, very glad about that. Valves wide open. This shouldn't take too long, I don't think. It's got 1 minute 27 to beat. We've got some steam already, 57 seconds in, and it's just starting to bubble now. So I'll get that turned off straight away. 1 minute 21.53, I was expecting a little bit better than that, to be completely honest. But that's the result, can't argue with the result. I will take the pot off now. Just leave that down there on the floor to cool down, and I'll wait for the stove to cool down. Once again, I'll weigh the gas canister and see how much gas that took. Okay, and the Jetboil gas canister is weighing in at 167 grams, so it took 3 grams to boil that water. Time to refill the gas canister, and we'll go again with the MSR Windburner now. That's the gas canister back to 170 grams, and it's time for the MSR Windburner. Once again, get the pot on, zero the scales, and put 250 grams of water in the cook pot. That's 250 grams exactly in the cook pot. And this stove doesn't have a piezoelectric lighter, so it's going to be a case of turn the gas on, get it lit, and get the pot on straight away. And I'll get my stopwatch at the ready. Stopwatch is going. Get that valve opened right up. 1 minute 21 to beat. That's the Jetboil's time. And I have to say, I haven't run this test yet. This is the first time I've done all of this, so I have no idea how the 3 stoves are going to compare. We've got some steam. And we've got boiling. Get that shut off. That took a whopping 1 minute 40, which I'm really surprised by. So I'll take this pot off. Put it on the ground with the others. I'll wait for the stove to cool a little bit, although we do have a nice insulated grab around the bottom here, much like on the Jetboil. So I can take the canister off and weigh that once I've zeroed the scales. That's 166 grams, so it took 4 grams of gas to boil 250 grams of water. So on that first test, we've got quite a spread of results, and I must admit I'm quite surprised. There are a few things to bear in mind, but I'll talk about those at the end, I think. For now, I'll just put a summary of the times and the weight of gas it took to boil that 250 grams of water on test 1 down the side here. Okay, things are going to get interesting now. What I have here is the remote control to my remote control carpet blower, which is just off to my right hand side. This remote has 3 different speeds, so if I press 1, 2 and 3, I get increasing levels of wind. It's going to be a nice steady breeze, and it's going to be fixed in the same spot for all of these tests. What I also have is a little cheapo anemometer, but I have actually found this to be quite accurate and definitely repeatable. So I'm going to measure the wind speed, and I'm going to keep all of the stoves on the same central line of the workbench. So I'll measure the wind speed from the side here, and we'll see how that affects the boiling time. Something tells me the Vango is not going to love this test, but the Vango is up first. 170 grams of gas back in the canister, and I'll now weigh out 250 grams of water again. Let's go. While I'm pouring this, I will explain that all 3 pots have been allowed to cool down in between the tests. That was mainly because I wanted to have the garage door open for a little bit, just to make sure I get some fresh air in here with the carbon monoxide that I'll be generating by cooking away on here. I've got 251 grams there, so I just need to pour out a smidge. And that's exactly 250, so it's now time to get the Vango hooked back up. And what I'd like to do is just measure the wind speed at the height of the flame with the fan going. So let's get the fan turned on, speed number 1. You can probably hear that. And if I hold this right in front of the stove, let's put it there. That is 13.5 miles an hour. So that's a fairly common wind that you get if you're trying to cook outside while you're camping. Let's see if we can even light the thing to start with. Okay, let's get the pot on, get the stopwatch at the ready, and away we go. Okay, well that didn't go to plan. The flame on the lighter was blowing out, so I've actually just wasted a bit of gas there. So I'll top back up to 170 and see if I can shield the lighter from the wind for a bit. That's the gas topped back up again. We'd only lost 1 gram, but I want to keep this as fair as I can. So I'll get the stove hooked back up, back on the center line of the workbench. I've decided I'm now going to get the pot all set up, and I'll get the flame lit, and then I'll turn the fan on, and we'll see if the Vango stove can even remain lit. Okay, so gas on, stopwatch on, and then fan on. As you can see, that flame is really struggling. The top of the flame is actually broken into 3 segments, and these 2 segments on this side have completely blown out. So we basically just have 1/3 of the flame which is doing its best to try and heat the pan, but of course the heat is also getting blown away from the underside of the pan. So I think what I'll do is I'll leave this for 3 minutes and see if it gets anywhere near boiling, and if it doesn't, we'll just call it a day, and then I'll try the windshield and see if that makes a difference. I can feel the warmth of the flame all the way out here, so that tells me that we're not going to be heating this water very much at all. Yeah, after 2 minutes, I'm just going to call that off. The water's not even slightly warm. Don't even have those small bubbles on the bottom of the cook pot. So I think we'll just conclude that this stove cannot cook in a wind as strong as 15 miles an hour. If I get out the Vango windshield, you can see that you can stand this up around your cook pot. You'd want to keep it nice and tight to keep the wind out as much as possible. But you can see from this that we'd actually shelter the flame really well from the wind. So I think what I'll do, just to give the Vango a fair run at this, is I'll charge the canister back up to 170 grams, and then we'll run the test again with the heat shield in place. That is the canister charged back up to 170 grams. We'll get the Vango stove back on its central position on the table, and this time I will get the pot on. That water is still cold, so I'm just going to reuse that. And then I'll get the flame lit and I'll wrap the heat shield around it just so you can see how it works. And the fan is now turned on. I can hear that the flame is still being buffeted around by the fan, but you'll see that the windshield is keeping the worst of that wind away from the flame. You can hear that flame is struggling to heat the water though. It's blowing around, and the heat is being blown out to the side as well. And that's now bubbling. So I stopped the clock there at 2 minutes 10, but you might have noticed I was packing away the windshield and turning off the gas canister. So I'll just check back on the footage and make sure to see if I need to take anything away from that. If I did, this is the time it should have been, and that is the time it took this stove to boil 250 grams of water with that gentle wind that we saw from the right-hand side with the windshield in place. Of course, without the windshield, it wouldn't even attempt to boil the water. So I'll now weigh the gas canister and see how much gas that took. It now weighs 165 grams, so it took 5 grams of gas to boil the 250 grams of water. Okay, so we'll recharge the canister and switch to the Jetboil. Okay, I think you know the drill now. 250 grams of water, 170 grams of gas. We are all set up. Back on the center line of the table. So I'll get it lit, then turn the wind on. That has blown out straight away. I'm quite surprised by that. Okay, I'll reset the clock and we'll try it again just in case it was a freak. Gas is fully on. Wind on. No. That is blowing out immediately. I'm really surprised by that. I have been out camping with Luke before and he's been using this. That's my friend who's lent me the Jetboil, and my Windburner was still burning away while his kept blowing out, so it really needed sheltering, and in the end he just went back to his tent because the Jetboil kept blowing out in the wind. I'm quite surprised by that because this is only a 13.5 mile an hour wind. It's not a gale or anything. Okay, I'll leave this one for now. I'll switch to the Windburner. If the Windburner will stay lit and boil, then I will perhaps move the fan a bit further away and we'll see how that affects things. Right, we go once again. Gas canister is charged back up. This is the MSR Windburner. What I will show you is a little feature. So you'll notice all these louvers around the edge. They actually stop around this portion of the pot. You go all the way around, but they stop just here. So the idea there is that you can direct that into the wind, so the wind hits the solid section of the pot rather than blowing through the louvers. So what I'll do is I'll angle that towards the wind because that's the way it should be used, and you can see that that's really going to affect just how much effect the wind has on the burn. So that's going to be positioned with the handle off to my right. Okay, let's get it filled with its 250 grams of water. Okay, 251 grams, that'll do. That's the first time it hasn't been exactly on 250. So handle out to the right, I've got the solid section of the pot there. Of course, with this pot we don't have the piezo lighter, so I have to light it, then put the cook pot on, which can make quite a difference. Stopwatch is at the ready. And I can hear that's still burning away in there, so we'll leave it to run. Got some small bubbles already, that's encouraging. A little bit of steam at the top now, 40 seconds in. I can feel some heat escaping around the side here. And that's boiled. We have a time of 1 minute 42.57. So that's only 2 seconds slower than when it was cooking with no wind at all. That has definitely surprised me, as you can probably tell, because my voice has gone a bit wobbly. That's how geeky I get about these things. Okay, 1 minute 42.57. So now, as before, I'll weigh the gas canister and we'll work out how much gas it took. And the last time it took 4 grams of gas, so I imagine it's going to be the same. Okay, it's just, yeah, 4 grams of gas again. So that puts us in a very interesting position. We have a Jetboil that can't cook at 13.5 miles an hour, and we have an MSR Windburner which has only taken 2 more seconds to boil the water in the same wind that blew out the Jetboil. So I have a couple of things I want to do now, which I'm just thinking about on the fly. What I want to do is see just how high a wind the Windburner can take, but I also want to drop the wind speed by pushing the fan back a bit, and I'll rerun the Jetboil to see what the maximum speed is that the Jetboil can remain lit in, the maximum wind speed. So let's do those now. Okay, we're starting to get a bit silly with this test now. So ramping up to fan speed 3, I've just measured 19 miles an hour at the point the stove is sitting at. So I am once again going to weigh out 250 grams of water in the cook pot on the MSR Windburner, and we'll see if it can remain lit, and if it can, how long it takes to boil the same amount of water. And I'll just check that wind speed again. What I don't want to do is hold the wind meter in front of the flame because I'm trying to keep it fair, but that's a 19 mile an hour wind speed, and I can hear that the flame is still burning. And we've already got some small bubbles in there, so this stove is successfully cooking at 19 miles an hour. And it's boiling. And that's a time of 1 minute 47.81 and a 19 mile an hour wind. In fact, it was so busy that the whole lot was starting to rock around in the wind. And again, I'll weigh the gas. And it's 4 grams again. Okay, the Windburner is still not giving up, so I've moved the fan much closer. It's now only about 2.5 feet away from the stove itself. 252 grams of water in the pot here, so a little bit more than usual, but this thing is proving to be an absolute beast, so I don't really mind about adding a couple more grams of water. So the fan is now producing 25 miles an hour of wind at the edge of the stove here. So once again, I'll light it, get the pot on, start the watch, and then start the fan. Fan on speed 3. I'm actually going to have to hold it down because it's trying to blow the pot over. But I can still feel heat coming off it, so it's still burning. And we've got small bubbles already, 20 seconds in. And that is now boiling. 1 minute 52, and I'll give you an idea of the fan speed. I'll hold my notepad up here. That's how strong the breeze is. This is a hardback notepad. I've got a cloth here as well. That's the kind of speed we've got, so as soon as it drops into that wind. And I'll turn that off so you can hear me a bit better now. Okay, so when it gets to the point where you're having to hold your stove down because the wind's so strong, yet it's still managing to boil within 10 seconds of the boil time in 0 wind, you know you've got a really effective stove. I'm actually blown away by this. I should say at this point that I am in no way affiliated to MSR. I bought this stove with my own money a couple of, maybe 3 years ago now. I'm genuinely impressed by this. That's mind-blowing. I don't think I can get this fan much closer. I'll try one last test, I think, with the fan right up as close as I can get it. But 25-mile-an-hour winds and we're still boiling water in 1 minute 52. And I'll just weigh the canister again for completeness of data. And that's 165 grams, so it's taken 1 more gram of gas. Okay, this is going to be my third and final test of the MSR Windburner now, because this is just getting silly. I've got my carpet blower right here next to me now. I've just measured the wind speed, and at the point the stove will be at, it's fluctuating between 29.5 and 30.5 miles an hour. So I think we can all agree that if it's getting that hot, if it's getting that windy, you're probably not going to be sitting out in the wind trying to cook. Maybe you will be, who knows? I think your biggest issue at that point is going to be getting a lighter that will light the stove with that kind of wind speed going on. But we're here for an experiment, so let's see what we can do. 170 grams of gas, 250 grams of water. Get my stopwatch at the ready this time. And I will go through the same process again of lighting the stove, getting the pot on, and then starting the clock, and then getting the fan going. Here we go, 30 miles an hour. It sounds like it is still burning. And we've got bubbles. Even out to the side here, it's 25 miles an hour. I can see that the bubbles are mainly forming on the far side of the pot, so this fan speed is definitely having an impact on the heat transfer. And we are boiling. You can hear it still hitting now as it cools down. So with a 30-mile-an-hour wind, it's taken 1 minute 55, which isn't even 15 seconds longer than it took with no wind at all. I am speechless, and I can't test this any harder. This is the strongest fan I have. I can't really get it too much closer, and yeah, looks like I won't be able to test this cook set to the point of failure because it just keeps on working. And for anyone interested, in between tests, I was filling the pot with cold water and leaving it there for a while to take all the heat out of the pot, and then discarding that water and using fresh cold water from that same bucket I've been using all the way through. So I'm trying to eliminate all the variables I can. I've used the same mass of water every time, the same mass of gas. So this is a very consistent test, I would say. I don't know what more to say about the MSR Windburner, really. That is amazing. I've always known it's good. I swear by this stove. I love using it because I know it will work in the wind. Yeah, so for £110, you could argue that's a lot of money, and it is a lot of money, but it also, of course, it gives you a cook pot, it gives you the stove itself, it gives you a cup, and it gives you really, really dependable wind performance. So I think all that's left now is to try and find the maximum wind speed that the Jetboil Flash can stay lit at. It failed at 13.5 miles an hour, so I'm going to use the fan on speed 1 out of 3 and move it all the way back and maybe try about 5 miles an hour, see if it can stay lit at that point, and we'll see how we go with that. I think this might be the last test in what has ended up being quite a long video, so thanks for sticking with me for this long. It's all in the name of science and engineering geekery. So I'm back on the Jetboil Flash now. I've got my 170, in fact it's 171 grams of gas this time, not that that 1 gram will make much difference. 250 grams of water, and I'm just checking around the Jetboil to make sure it doesn't have any wind beating features. In fact, I have just noticed that up at the top there are 3 of those little vents are blocked off. So I wonder if that might make a difference in the wind. If it does, I'll rerun the test, but we'll find out. So What I can't do is rotate the pot. So because the wind beating feature is in the stove base, I can't actually position that the way I want to have the gas valve control where I'd like it, which isn't quite as good as the MSR. So I'll get the pot on. Just checking the pot. The pot is the same all the way around on the Jetboil, so it doesn't have any sort of wind blocking features. So I'll get that dropped on. No, that's already blown out. Okay, that's a fail. So because I had 1 gram extra gas in here, I'll just carry on. I'll push the fan even further back. I'll have to drop it down to about 5 miles an hour. I'll be back in a sec. Okay, so I've moved the fan all the way to the back of the garage. It's about 12 feet away, 15 feet away from us, and it's blowing at a fairly constant 5.4, 5.6 miles an hour. You can feel it. It's not a strong wind at all. It's just a very gentle breeze. I've still got the Jetboil orientated so that those 3 blocked off louvers are facing the wind, so hopefully that will help it. We shall see. So I'll get my stopwatch ready. We'll try and get it started. Sorry, I'll turn the fan off first. Get it started. Start the stopwatch, get that cranked right up, and then let's see if it can keep going. It is just hanging on there, so this is perfect. So of course the previous test was 8 miles an hour, we're now at about 5.5 miles an hour. So somewhere around 6 miles an hour seems to be the maximum wind that the Jetboil Flash can stay lit in. Now let's see how long it takes to boil. Last time the Jetboil took 1 minute 21. That was with no wind. We're currently up to 2 minutes 25. It's not boiling yet. Okay, we've got a boil. So that has taken 2 minutes 47.91. And as ever, for the last time, let's weigh the gas and see how much gas it took to boil that water. There is an insulated grip around the bottom of this stove, but it's nowhere near as effective as the MSR, so it's still quite hot. And that's 165 grams of gas. So that is actually the same amount as it took the MSR Windburner to boil, but that was at 30 miles an hour compared to 5.5 miles an hour. Okay, well that concludes all of my testing of these 3 very different stoves. I'm really surprised by the difference between the Jetboil Flash and the MSR Windburner. I always knew the Windburner was good, but the Flash can only just about deal with a 5 mile an hour wind, whereas the Windburner is still going strong and boiling much faster at 30 mile an hour winds. So that's a very, very clear difference. The Vango, of course, that very simple, cheap, basic stove, it's £16, so it doesn't necessarily seem fair to compare it to a £110 stove at first glance. But of course, when I put the full kit together, so the stove, the windshield and the cook pot set, that came to 50 quid, so it's actually only half the price of the Windburner. And if you ask me, the Windburner is a much, much more dependable piece of kit. You also have to consider the pack size, of course, so all 3 of these little sets pack up quite neatly. All 3 of them will house a canister within, so what I'll do is I'll just measure the heights of them and I'll put up the height of the packed kit, and I'll also put up the height of the cooking system once it's set up. So of course that's the canister, the stove and the pot, because sometimes you need to be aware of that stack height when it's all within your tent. If you're cooking in your vestibule, for example, it might be that it's just too high and it can't fit in that space because the tent sort of slopes in and prevents it from fitting in there. So there you have it. That's a fairly comprehensive test, I would say. I've been as fair as I possibly could be. We have a very clear winner. The MSR Windburner is the stove to buy out of these 3 if you want to cook in the wind. Of course, you can use the Vango heat shield. As you saw, it's a little bit of a faff. It's not the end of the world. If you want to save some money, then that system definitely works. But the Windburner is, yeah, it takes the biscuit. Thank you for watching. I really hope this has been helpful. If I've got any details wrong, please feel free to comment and set me straight on those. I'd love to hear your experiences. Which would you choose? Do you think that it's worth another £30 to buy the Windburner, or would you rather spend half the Windburner money and get the little Vango set up? Let me know, and I'll see you in the next video.